Mr. Vitter. Mr. Vitter. Aye. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham. Aye. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders, aye.
Wishing to change the vote?
Are there any senators in the chamber wishing to vote or wishing to change their vote? If not, the yeas are 66, the nays are 27, and the bill, as amended, is passed. Senator from Ohio.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 5 minutes. Following my remarks, Senator Sessions will have the floor.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as been morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under the leadership of Chairwoman Stabenow and Ranking Member Cochran, the Senate has again passed a deficit-reducing bipartisan bill that will help our farms, our families, our economy, our environment. The Agriculture Reform, Food and Jobs Act of 2013 is a good start to cultivate a new era of prosperity in our country and reinvesting in rural America. That's because this bill benefits all Americans, especially in my home state of Ohio. 1 in 7 jobs in Ohio, in places like Custer and Defiance, is related to food and agriculture. To keep our economy growing, the Farm Bill must remain a priority here in Congress. We've shown the Senate can do its part. To people who are uncertain about our ability to work across the aisle, I say look at this Farm Bill. To people who are concerned about spending in Washington, I say look at this Farm Bill. To people who are disheartened about our ability to help low-income families make ends meet, I say look at this Farm Bill. This bill saves more than $24 billion. It maintains important investments in conservation and nutrition and renewable energy and rural development. Farmers in Ohio and across the country tell us they want a leaner, more efficient, market-oriented farm safety net. Taxpayers deserve that too. By eliminating direct payments, by linking crop insurance to conservation compliance, by reforming our risk management programs, the Senate's taken that first step. Every farmer knows the importance of building on last season's work. Last year, Senators Thune, Durbin, Lugar, the predecessor, the presiding officer, and I proposed the aggregate risk and revenue management program, streamlining the farmer safety net, making it more market-oriented. The Ag Risk Coverage Program included in this bill gives farmers the tools they need to mitigate risks, ensuring that payments happen only when farmers need them most. The program relies on current data and as a result is more responsive to farmers' needs and more responsive to taxpayers. It includes a provision to help Ohio farmers and producers sell their products directly to consumers. It would make a world of difference to families in schools who want to eat locally grown food. I appreciate the efforts and the interest and the support of Senator Cochran in those efforts. This bill does not include my food and agriculture market development amendment sponsored by 14 of my colleagues to provide needed funding to several important programs that support the development of a stronger, more sustainable food system. We will work on that in the House. By aligning our agriculture, health, and economic policies in ways that ensure farmers get a fair price for their product, all Americans can have access to affordable, healthy food while contributing to strong communities and thriving local economies. The Farm Bill affects every American every day. It's a deficit reduction bill, it's a jobs bill, it's a conservation bill, it's a rural development bill, and it's bipartisan. I commend again Senator Stabenow and Senator Cochran for their work in this effort. Their joint effort to work across party lines is to be commended.
The Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President, I want to thank the Senate for passing this very important farm bill. The Agriculture Reform, Food and Jobs Act of 2013. I especially thank my colleagues Debbie Stabenow and Pat Roberts and their staff members for the hard work that they devoted to this effort. Their bill, when it was begun, passed the Senate last year. Their legislation became the starting point for our work this year on the bill. The chairwoman of the Agriculture Committee, Senator Stabenow, and her staff director, Chris Adamo, have been outstanding leaders in this effort. And I would, at this opportunity, thank them and all of the members of their staff for their hard work in developing a strategy and developing the language of a bill that could enjoy such broad support. Members of our committee staff and my personal office staff have worked very hard, too, in this effort. I'd like to thank them for their contributions. I appreciate the hard work. They include our staff director, T.A. Hawks, Nana McCoy, Kevin Batey, Darrell Dixon, Adam Tell, Daniel Ulmer, Ben Mosley, Taylor Nicholas, Julian Baer, Andrew Velasti, Chris Gallegos, Stephen Wall, James Glick, and Sarah Margaret Hughes. The staff members have really done an outstanding job, and I'm very pleased that they have been members of our team. And for all of them, and especially for the senators and the support we've received today, we appreciate the support very much. Mr. President, I yield the floor. The quorum.
Mr. President.
The senator from Ohio.
The suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Cochran. I ask unanimous consent that tributes to Frank Lautenberg, the late senator from New Jersey, be printed as a Senate document that the members have until 12 noon on Thursday, June 20th, to submit tributes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent for the appointment at the desk appears separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 11th, that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. Following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S-744, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, under the previous order. Further, the chair recess from 12:30 until 2:15 tomorrow to allow for the weekly caucus meetings.
Without objection.
Tomorrow, 2:15, there will be a cloture vote on the motion to proceed to the immigration bill. If cloture is invoked, there will be a second vote at 4 o'clock to adopt the motion to proceed and begin consideration of the bill. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that adjourn under the previous order following the remarks of Senator Sessions as provided for under the previous order.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
The senator from Alabama.
I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we're looking now and considering the immigration bill, S-744, that's before us, 2 volumes, 1,000 pages, and unfortunately, it doesn't do what its sponsors say it does, and doesn't provide the security and other important items that we want in an immigration reform bill, and therefore it cannot be passed in its present form and should not be passed in that form. It's just that simple. This is a big, important issue. We need, when we pass immigration reform, we do not need to be back in the situation that occurred in 1986 when they passed immigration reform and promised to do enforcement in the future. They gave the amnesty immediately, and the promises of enforcement never occurred. This is not a little matter. It's resulted in 11 million people now being in our country illegally. The result directly of the failure of the 1986 bill to carry out its enforcement promises. The direct result of presidents and Congress from not insisting that that happen. And so there's a general consensus, even among the Gang of Eight, that Congress and the President can't be trusted, and we need to have legislation that somehow mandates that to be happening. Because, well, you know, you have to have, in their minds, the amnesty first. That's just the way it's got to be. And once that's given, well, we'll promise to take care of it in the future. Now, I've been discussing the two aspects of immigration that causes us to have the illegal entrance. The first part is obvious. It's people who enter the border illegally. In any number of our borders and ports, they come in illegally, and that is a big part of our problem. Actually, 60%, though, only. 40% of the problem are the people that come into our country legally on a visa. The others just come illegally. They have no right to enter the country. They just enter. These have a right to enter the country. They come in on a visa, and they just don't go home. They just stay. And history tells them nothing ever happens. Nobody knows they didn't return home. Nobody clocks them out when they go home. Nobody knows they're here, and they just stay. And the President of the United States, and through the Secretary of Homeland Security, has directed ICE agents, the Immigration Customs Enforcement officers who are over and around our country, although small in number, about 5,000, they've directed them basically not to execute any deportation proceedings against anybody, almost none. And you have to be convicted of a big felony, serious crime. Only then do they initiate deportation. And we've got cities that are failing to support the federal government in any way. They won't even notify the federal government when they catch somebody for a crime in their city and discover they're illegally in the country. They won't notify the federal government that they're there, so they can come and pick them up and carry out the deportation that's required. And this is the kind of sad state we're in. And it certainly is a sad state indeed. And so the American people, by a 4-to-1 margin, by a poll just a few days ago, said we're prepared to be generous to people who entered the country illegally and haven't got in trouble, and be compassionate to them, but we want to see the enforcement occur. And by a 4-to-1 margin, that poll showed that the American people said the enforcement should come first before you grant the legality, before you give the amnesty. Now, isn't that good common sense? And as I go through a second part of my concern about this project, you'll see the ineffectiveness and unwillingness of the federal government to fulfill its role of ensuring that our sovereignty is defended through the elimination of illegal immigration. And we can do that. And we can do it, but we're not doing it. So the first part, dealing with the borders, I mentioned today, they soften the law, current law. Current law is that you have to have 100% enforcement, security at the border under the standards that they utilize there. This bill says 90%. And it otherwise reduces the enforceability and the enforcement standards of making sure our border is lawful. And I would just say, first and foremost, each one of these matters are exceedingly complex and must be done properly. So we talked about earlier the crafting of legislation necessary to ensure that our border is lawful. It requires a lot of work and a lot of different strategies, capabilities for our men and women who are out there at risk enforcing that law. And that's the fundamental reason we should have a legislation that goes step by step. We should have had a piece of legislation that's been worked on very hard involving the immigration officers, the Border Patrol officers. That legislation would be brought forth and we would pass it to fix the border. And then the second part, as I'm talking about today, the entry-exit visa situation where people enter the country lawfully according to a visa but don't return. That has its own unique and complex systems that need to be dealt with, and that needs to be done independently and separately. We need a separate and independent analysis of how to deal with the workplace to ensure that people who don't get jobs who come into the country illegally in the future. We've got to end this. So let me just say, I'm taking the bill at its words. They want to give a legal status to everybody that's here. And so I'm talking about now, what do you do to try to ensure this doesn't happen again in the future? We're not saying go out and try to find everybody that's in the country illegally and capture them and deport them. Well, that's not a practical solution at this point in our history. And it doesn't, to me, we do need to figure out how to compassionately deal with those individuals, but we don't need to be where we can't enforce the law in the future. So we have another amnesty upon us, another situation with millions of people here illegally because we failed to do our duty. Well, the way you do the entry-exit visa has been determined by Congress for a number of years, is to use a biometric entry-exit visa system. And so we take fingerprints of people right now, everybody that comes to the country, and that they are clocked in when they enter the United States, and that fingerprint identifies them as the person who has the visa. And then when they leave, they're supposed to clock out and use their fingerprint, which is the best biometric. It's a proven system. You put your fingerprint, maybe just 2 fingers on the reader as you go onto the airplane to fly out of the country, and it reads it and see if you're a terrorist or you're a criminal fleeing prosecution, a crime you may have committed in the United States. As simple and easy as can be. But for one reason or another, this has been blocked. And so the history of the biometric exit system is so instructive for us because it tells us how the presidential and congressional authorities of America have failed to carry out what ought to be a universally accepted bipartisan plan to make our entry-exit visa system work right and reduce that 40% of the illegal immigrants in our country that come by visas. So, in 1996, Congress first adopted a requirement for an entry-exit system to track those who were entering and leaving the United States in the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. That was the first time it was passed, in 1996. And in 2000, Congress passed another law requiring the entry-exit system be electronic and to be implemented at all air, sea, and land ports of entry. That's in 2000, 13 years ago. Again in 2000, when amending the visa waiver program, Congress required, quote, fully automated entry and exit control system. Entry and exit control system to record entry and departure information for all aliens participating in the program. Congress also required that passports be machine readable. After 9/11, this was a time of national introspection and study. Congress once again demanded the implementation of an entry-exit system through the passage of the Patriot Act. It's in the Patriot Act. The intent of Congress was made clear at that time, quote, in light of the terrorist attacks perpetrated against the United States on September 11, 2001, it is the sense of Congress that the Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of State, should fully implement the integrated entry and exit data system for airports, seaports, and land border ports of entry with all deliberate speed as expeditiously as practical. Importantly, Congress demanded that the entry-exit system be biometric. This is important, and based on tamper-resistant, machine-readable documents. A biometric system requires that an immigration document match the individual presenting the document. In other words, there's a biometric capability to make sure the person who presents a document is the person named in the document. There are a variety of ways to make a document biometric, but the most common is to use digital fingerprints, which can easily be run through computer databases to match records on file. This is done every day. According to the Department of Homeland Security's own website, today, it's on their site today, Secretary Napolitano's website, it says this, quote, unlike names and dates of birth, which can be changed, biometrics are unique and virtually impossible to forge. Collecting biometrics helps the U.S. government prevent people from using fraudulent documents to enter the country illegally. Collecting biometrics also helps protect your identity. In the event you travel, your travel documents are lost or stolen. Close quote. That's on the website today of Homeland Security, and it's absolutely correct. But it didn't happen in 2000. In 2002, Congress reiterated the demand for a biometric entry-exit system at all ports of entry, requiring Homeland Security issue aliens, quote, only machine-readable, tamper-resistant visas and other travel and entry documents that use biometric identifiers, close quote. That was what we passed in 2002. It also required that the government install biometric readers and scanners, quote, at all ports of entry in the United States. Also in 2002, the Department of Homeland Security initiated the U.S. visit system, which has really got great potential, and it has done some good things, but it hadn't been completed. And then that system was to develop this entire process. 2 years later, U.S. Visit was collecting biometric data on all aliens entering the United States. So they take this data and they get it. In 2004, Congress again demanded a biometric entry-exit system. In 2004, passing another law. Through the passage of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorist Prevention Act of 2004. And in that act, Congress said, quote, Congress finds that completing a biometric entry and exit data system as expeditiously as possible is an essential investment in the effort to protect the United States by preventing the entry of terrorists, close quote. It goes on, quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall develop a plan to accelerate the full implementation of an automated biometric entry and exit data system, close quote. That's what we did again in 2004. 2007, now the 9/11 Commission comes back together again. They'd issued a report with a whole lot of recommendations, and they met to see how many of their recommendations had been adopted. So they reiterated the need for an exit visa system and required exit and demanded that the exits apply to all foreign nationals entering under the visa waiver program and added a biometric component. So that was in 2007, and that was passed. So Congress is crystal clear and consistent that this is what we expect to be done. Has it been done? No. It has not yet been done. And what about this new immigration bill that's got 1,000 pages in it, and we're told is the toughest in history? We're told, as Senator Schumer said, tough as nails. Does it require it? Will it ensure that it finally gets done? No. Not only that, it alters the law. It says it doesn't have to be done. It eliminates biometric and it eliminates land entry and exit systems. So you don't have an exit visa system at anything but the airports under their plan, and it's not biometric. It actually weakens dramatically repeated law enactments of the United States Congress. So it's not stronger on the visa program, where 40% of the overstays come from. 40% of the people entering the country illegally comes through visa overstays. It doesn't fix that. It weakens that law. And I don't see how my colleagues can come here and brag about this when plain as day, that's what their bill does. And I don't think the bill should be considered in this form. And the struggle continues. Get this. Last week, the House, still frustrated about this matter, Representative Barletta of Pennsylvania, got an amendment passed to prohibit funding for the Department of Homeland Security parties and receptions until the biometric entry-exit system was fully implemented as the 2004 law required. So, what do we draw from this? Well, we draw several things. One of them is the American people already get it. They don't trust Congress to do anything they say. We pass laws and we go home and we say we fixed the biometric bill and it never happens. We pass 6 different laws requiring it and it doesn't happen. And then they say they're passing the toughest bill that's ever been written about entry-exit visas, and we're going to fix this problem, and we recognize 40% of the people come through that way. And is it fixed? No. It undermines current law. The current law is not being enforced, I acknowledge. They just surrender and give in. Now it's not. Now this can be done. First of all, we need to go back. So I think the American people's frustration with what's happening in this Congress is well earned. They have a right to be unhappy. And a recent poll, or some poll not too long ago, showed this. Asked people, are you more frustrated or angry with people who enter the country illegally or the government officials who've allowed it to happen? 88% said they were mad at Congress and the government. American people aren't mad at people who want to come to the country illegally. They are frustrated and angry that their elected representatives who year after year, decade after decade, promise to fix this system and blithely go about their business and never do it. They say one thing and they do another. And it's not right. Well, they say, well, you know, it just can't be done. It's too hard. It's too expensive. It slows down entry exits. People, we just don't want to do this. And that's why we just never got around to it. Well, we just discovered a report that never got any publicity, that I don't know if it was secret or not, but I didn't realize what was in it, in 2009. I went to the Appropriations Committee. They're not the Immigration Committee. It sat around. Nobody paid much attention to it. 2009, the Department of Homeland Security conducted a pilot program at the Detroit and Atlanta airports to deal with what would happen if we had an entry-exit biometric visa system at those two airports. They found a biometric exit system, we have the entry, remember, was not only feasible, but fast, accurate, did not slow passengers as they boarded the departing flights. During 1 month of heavy international travel time, June and July, the biometric exit system in Detroit processed 9,448 aliens and identified 44 from the consolidated watch list and 60 suspected overstays out of less than 10,000 people. So this is a terrorist watch list and the criminal consolidated watch list. Some of these were arrested for violation of federal law and had warrants out for their arrest on non-terrorist charges. Some of them showed up on watch lists, and 60 of them were suspected overstays. Well, what about Atlanta? Well, they processed 20,296 aliens subject to U.S. visit and identified 131 on the watch list and got a hits on those in 90 overstays. So since 9/11, at least 36 individuals who have overstayed their visas have been convicted of terrorism-related charges. 36 since the 9/11 attacks have been arrested for terrorism charges, and they were visa overstays, including Amin al-Khalifi, who attempted to bomb the Capitol last year. The Christmas Day bomb plot and the near getaway by the would-be Times Square bomber Faisal Shahzad, who had already boarded a flight leaving the United States when he was arrested, just before he could take off. So we are once again reminded that border security is an essential element of national security, and exit control is part of that rubric. Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the Boston bomber alleged, remained invisible to the immigration system, having exited the country for a 6-month stay in Russia because today's biographic exit data was insufficient to identify him as leaving the country. In this case, a misspelling, or he used a different spelling, and he wasn't picked up on the list, whereas if he'd used his fingerprints, he would have been identified biometrically instantly. While S-744 requires the use of software to correct misspellings, it may not work for the millions of other names that the software does not pick up. And it won't pick up the fact that there's an arrest warrant for murder out for him, let's say in Indianapolis, when he's getting on a plane in Boston. But it should get picked up if they use the entry-exit visa. And the individual would then successfully have fled the United States and may be able to get away completely with a serious crime. So the only way to verify a person is who they are, they claim to be, really is through a biometric identifier. During the committee markup, I offered an amendment to require the implementation of the biometric exit system as required by current law as part of the trigger to allow the Secretary to grant green cards to those given amnesty. In other words, if she didn't have that that fixed and in place as current law required it, the amnesty in 10 years, the green card would not be issued. A biometric air-sea exit solution is available right now, as it was in 2009. It requires no infrastructure changes to airports, can be deployed immediately. Neither the TSA nor airlines need to be directly involved in this. Also in 2005, biometric exit for vehicles and pedestrians at land ports was tested and found to be workable. To implement that solution today would require less than was required during the 2005 testing, and simply use of the biometric data already in the system and tamper-resistant biometric card and expansion of the current Trusted Traveler program in entry lanes to the exit lanes. We do the entry, we need to do the exit lanes. So nevertheless, my amendment, I guess it wasn't, it fails 12-6, so I guess Senator Schumer and the leaders of the Gang of Eight didn't give a pass to the Republican members, at least, who might have voted for my bill, so they had to stick together. Senator Schumer claimed that such a system would cost about $25 billion to implement. Well, somebody had used that figure, and it was I had just only then discovered this 2009 report of the exit system in Atlanta and Detroit, this report right here. We just found out that there was actually documented evidence that it doesn't cost anything like that much. However, when we aggregating the 2008 U.S. visa impact analysis data and industry data, the greatest total cost for the first-year technology implementation at air and seaports would be approximately $172 million to $855 million, depending on collection units chosen. The more expensive units do not require an attendant to even be there, but a monitoring attendant that can supervise a number of mobile kiosks all at once. In addition, a 2008 Air-Sea Biometric Exit Project Regulatory Impact Analysis also noted that Air-Sea Biometric System was less costly than a biographic exit system for several reasons. Improved detection of aliens overstaying visas. 300 ICE agents have to do overstays now. Cost avoidance resulting from improved immigration and customs enforcement efficiency. In 2007, cost for removal per visa violator was $18,000 per individual. Improved efficiency and processing of entry-exit data. Improved national security environment. So, and today the cost is significantly lower still because the latest technology requires less manpower to operate and support processing. So in an exit system, you come through the airport, you get ready to board the plane, and while you're in the area there heading to your gate, you simply go by a spot, and for a few seconds, according to this report, negligible slowing down. You put your finger on it, it reads your fingerprint and said, yes, indeed, this is the individual that entered the country. He has a permission to leave, and it runs a check of terrorist and crime data and to see if there's a warrant for the person's arrest. And then they get to move right on. It requires, the report found, less than 2 seconds for fingerprint capture. That's amazing. And of course, a lot of people don't know, but many police departments provide police officers in their automobiles fingerprint reading data. So they arrest somebody for DUI, and they have them put their finger on the machine, and who knows, bingo, it comes up, they're wanted for rape somewhere. That's how you apprehend fugitives today. We do far less hunting them down by name than we just simply wait for them to get picked up in some sort of checking, some sort of other arrest. Mobile units do that. These systems are now deployed internationally in 9 countries and 20 international airports, including Australia, processing over 700,000 passengers per year. So this can be done, and I'm amazed and really frustrated it's not happened. When Secretary Ridge was Homeland Security Secretary, I guess the first one, we talked about this. My experience in law enforcement was the fingerprint had to be the data, because it's the fingerprint that the police officers and FBI use when they arrest somebody for a crime. And many people flee. And many people who flee like to leave the country. And the last thing he said when he left office, he said, I have one bit of advice for my successors, and that is use the fingerprint. And after much effort and much debate and much conflict, he had distilled that down to that simple decision. And we're almost there, frankly. We should complete it. So in the committee markup, an amendment sponsored by Senator Hatch was adopted that requires yet another pilot program limited to the 10 busiest airports within 2 years, and the FAA designated Core 30 airports over 6 years. The amendment, which does not serve as a trigger to amnesty or anything else, fails to require biometric exit at the land ports, which makes the system unenforceable and almost unusable, because a person can fly in and they can exit from a land port. And you need to record that, or you don't know whether they ever left the country or not. As Senator Grassley said at the time in the committee, quote, in 1996 we passed an entry-exit system and it's not law. So what I see before us is a fig leaf that leads us to believe that we're doing more than what the bill requires, but because the bill does a lot less than what we decided in 1996 we needed to do, I think this amendment should be defeated, close quote. But it wasn't. It passed. Finally, we were told that all of the triggers would have to be fully implemented. If they're not fully implemented, there will be no green cards issued. And this is one of the Gang of 8, selling the bill, talking about the bill, and that it had to be fully implemented. These are all the triggers, and there'll be no green cards. So let's take a look at what the bill actually says about that. The bill says that after 10 years, the Secretary may adjust the status of those illegal immigrants who receive amnesty to lawful permanent resident or green card status. So the Secretary can adjust the people who came illegally from their temporary legal status to permanent resident of the United States, green card, on a guaranteed pathway in 3 years to full citizenship. But that's supposed to only be done when the Secretary certifies to Congress that her border security strategy is substantially deployed and substantially operational, and her fencing plans is implemented and substantially completed. So these terms are undefined, leaving these determinations to the sole discretion of the Secretary. And she said we don't need any more fencing. So she gets to decide about fencing. And what is she required to do? To make her fencing plan has to be initiated and approved. Or her plan has to be implemented. But the plan doesn't have to call for a single foot of fencing. And also, the green card status can be given when she has implemented the new, and this is important, employment verification system required under the bill, which is for new employees, not current employees. You do an E-Verify system to check on that, something like that, and is not mandatory until 5 years after the regulations are published. So the employment effort is really not effective until as long as 5 years after the amnesty has been provided. So the real deadline for implementation of the employment E-Verify successor system that they'd like to develop, maybe as long as 10 years. And this is less than what the 2007 bill called for, the bill that failed. 2007 required E-Verify for all new hires 18 months after the enactment of the bill, and for all current employees 3 years after the enactment of the bill. So their plan for the E-Verify system is far weaker than the plan in 2007, and it suggests by putting it off and not having current employees have to have it used with them, that they're not very serious about it. Indeed. Also, when she is using an electronic but not biometric exit system at air and sea, but not land ports of entry. So another requirement for trigger is that there must be an in-use and electronic, not biometric, exit system, but air and sea ports, but not land. And experts have told us if you don't do land, you never know when anybody left the country. Unfortunately, like most seemingly tough provisions in this bill, it's followed by exceptions that swallows the rule. The bill allows the Secretary to grant green cards to those given amnesty without satisfying these triggers. They're just not, there's so many loopholes in it. And so she can certify she has a plan. She can certify that we've expanded the system electronically, but not biometrically, at airports and land and seaports, but not land ports, and you end up with what would appear to be a big improvement over current law, but it's not. Current law requires biometric at land, sea, and air. And so this produces that. And the bill undermines the ability to deport people who are in the country illegally. There's a whole lot of examples that I could give at this point and point that out, and I won't, not tonight, to the Chair's relief. So, like 1986, amnesty comes first. It will occur. Deportations will stop, and it happens now. But the enforcement that is promised will not happen in any effective way. That's clear. If you read the bill, there's not a real sense that anybody that knows anything about enforcement was there in the room drafting the bill, driving the legislation to close loopholes and make this system enforceable in the future and end its brokenness today, end the illegality today, and put us on a path that we can be proud of for our future. The bill does not fix the illegality that dominates so much of our current system. It surrenders to illegality and does not stand up and fix it. This is not what the good people of this country want for their future. Another long period of illegal immigration and another inevitable amnesty. We can fix the border. We can do that. We can fix our visa system. It's not that hard. We know how to do it now. We can fix and dramatically increase the ability of employers to ensure that they hire only legal workers and not hire illegal workers, leaving Americans unemployed at record rates. And we can establish a strong interior enforcement system that has integrity and fairness to it. This bill is not close to that goal, even though we could do it. It fails to move us where we need to go to put this system on a sound path. It should not become law. I thank the Chair and would note the absence of a
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Today, the Senate passed the 5-year Farm Bill. The biggest piece of the bill is $760 billion over a decade.